Speaking of popular progressives, now we're going to go to Michigan with Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, who is running in the Democratic primary for United States Senate. Now, that used to be a three-way race between Mallory McMorrow, Haley Stevens, and El-Sayed. However, McMorrow suspended her campaign on July 5th. She ran a very spirited center-left campaign, but was not the staunch progressive like Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. Now, the other challenger, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, is the proud moderate, the centrist candidate whose platform is very status quo. Good for her, I guess. But anyway, I'm going to share with you 3 reasons and examples why I know Dr. Abdul El-Sayed is going to win this primary and the general election in November, and follow that up with a good compare-contrast. We've got the data to back that up. Okay, so first off, real quick, just this past Friday at a Canvas kickoff event in Detroit that Dr. Abdul El-Sayed's campaign was having. Abdul was there along with someone who endorsed him, Attorney General Keith Ellison from Minnesota. He came to Detroit to say a few words for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, and lo and behold, guess who was in the front row of that event? Rabble-rouser Jake Lang, the January 6th rioter who is a MAGA Trump supporter and has been spreading falsehoods and creating havoc all across the internet. So, Jake Lang stands up right in front of Keith Ellison and charges at him saying, like, why are you prosecuting me? How dare you prosecute me? So, despite all this anger and this yelling at this volunteer event, just a bunch of grassroots young folks that just want to knock on a few doors. That's all it was. But Jake Lang starts making a scene and has his phone out, trying to film it, create content for whatever he's doing. This was a moment of leadership for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. He then, within seconds of Jake Lang standing up, like trying to basically harass Keith Ellison, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, he tells the security guard to put his body in front of Ellison and Jake Lang. Then he says to the crowd, "This is Jake Lang. Now let's chant him out." So Dr. Abdul El-Sayed starts chanting, "USA, USA," and the entire room starts chanting as well. And because of that, it made Jake Lang super embarrassed because chanting USA was his thing. But more importantly, it just showed what a fool he was to interrupt this kind of event, knowing that he was outnumbered with no support, and he was just trying to, be mean. There was no point of him being there. So eventually, out the door Jake Lang went, embarrassed, disappointed, sad, crybaby, whatever. And then everyone cheered for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. So it was so remarkable to see that kind of leadership, that quick thinking, but also how to stand up to a bully. And he goes on to then make this stump speech off the cuff saying, in America, Jake Lang wants hate and division. But for Abdul's campaign, they want unity, they want love for their country, and they want love for each other. And everyone who is going to be a true American wants an America full of respect and kindness, not whatever Jake Lang brings to the table. So it was so inspiring in that moment to watch it online, to hear people talk about it who were there. And honestly, it's moments like that you can't buy a consultant to tell you to do. That's how you know the organic is real, and the fact that Abdul El-Sayed is going to win based on his merit, character, and leadership alone. So, the next 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, Abdul El-Sayed and his campaign then have rallies with Bernie Sanders and AOC in Detroit and Lansing, Michigan. So if you want to watch the rallies, I highly recommend you do. You can watch them on YouTube, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed's YouTube channel, also with AOC and Bernie's, and they've recorded the live stream so you can watch the whole thing. And it was really great to see, folks like Rashida Tlaib show up, right? She was there in support as well. A few other prominent figures like Sean Fain from UAW. He spoke in support of Abdul El-Sayed. And mind you, the United Auto Workers Union, they endorsed him. Whereas, Haley Stevens right now has been lying about her record, saying oh yeah, she has the union support. She doesn't. She does not. She's been lying. So, that being said, they're both great speeches on Saturday and Sunday, both rallies, I should say. But I would really love for you to listen to the message that Bernie and AOC tie to this rally, especially with this campaign. They both remark on how, let's start with Bernie. Bernie focuses on how, while this primary is with Haley Stevens as the opponent, everyone knows it's not really about Abdul versus Haley Stevens. It's about Abdul versus big money. Because let's face it, there has not only been an incredible amount of money poured into this, right, between AIPAC spending nearly $30 million, also super PACs on Haley Stevens' behalf, raising an upward of $50 million. So even the fact that this election could be bought by billionaires and by corporate interests, that just proves that this is not a democracy. This is a grassroots candidate, Abdul El-Sayed, running on a progressive policy that challenges the status quo backed by corporate interests. So that's why Abdul El-Sayed is rejecting corporate PAC money and only funding grassroots dollars. And that being said, it is really inspiring to see him do so well despite all these challenges. AOC's message, very similar. When she asks the crowd, how are we going to how are we going to support $50 million in a primary? How are we going to say that this is a free and fair election? And ultimately, we know that these corporations are spending this $50 million as a return on their investment. So then she asks the question, what is that return and why? And what Abdul El-Sayed says, what is that investment that Haley Stevens is promising them? But ultimately, AOC makes the case, do we vote for the $50 million or do we vote for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed? It's a powerful moment. She's really refined her messaging and stayed very true to the fight the oligarchy messaging that Bernie and AOC toured the country through, earlier in 2025. And we covered that on the podcast. So the fact that, between AOC and Bernie, fighting against the oligarchy, this has been a really good cause, show of support even, how that message is resonating and now is becoming clear as day when $50 million is getting spent against Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, which is why we must support him in the Democratic primary in Michigan. So not only is the messaging resonating with voters, but last but not least, the latest polling data from July 15th has shown that between Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed is in the lead with 56%, and Haley Stevens with 40%. So that is plus 16 points, even with all of this spending, all the negative attack ads, and all the disadvantages against Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. But he's still up. So that tells me that not only does he have the leadership and the character, not only does he have the right message, especially with endorsers like Bernie Sanders and AOC, but then lastly, the people he's even winning in the polling, which the establishment and the status quo love to hold that against progressives' heads, saying, oh, well, look at the polls say. What do the polls say? Who's more selectable? So the fact that he's beating them at their own game across all different criteria. Speaking of which, let me share with you a quick compare and contrast how I know that Dr. Abdul El-Sayed is winning. And we have the data. So, with that said, fundraising for Q2 of this year, that is basically April 1st through June 30th. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed raised $4.5 million, and Haley Stevens raised only $2 million. And from Q1 to Q2, which would have been January through March, comparing that to April through June, for Abdul El-Sayed, that's a 99% increase in fundraising. And for Haley Stevens, her $2 million was only a 3% increase. That's really bad. Then lastly, in terms of small dollar donations, Abdul El-Sayed increased that Q1 to Q2 by 108%, and Haley Stevens' grassroots dollars donations decreased 16%. Yes, that means less grassroots donations came into her campaign between January and March compared to April through June. That's really bad. But also shows you that it's the big moneyed interests that are behind her, not the grassroots donors. In terms of volunteer events, and this is as of July, let's say 20th. So as of July 20th, Abdul had 86 events planned. Haley Stevens only had 13. In terms of pro super PAC money, which these campaigns cannot coordinate with, but there's about $853,000 being spent in favor of Abdul El-Sayed. In terms of Haley Stevens, her super PACs, again, $52 million. That's incredible. Not in a good way either, because the fact that there's $52 million being spent in her favor, that's basically buying the election. And we need to get money out of politics, overturn Citizens United, so we can't have super PAC money in elections. Good done. So anyway, last but not least, again, in terms of polling, we've got Abdul El-Sayed with a plus 45% favorable, Haley Stephen plus 30. So the fact that more people even like Dr. Abdul El-Sayed says a lot about his character, his charm. And listen, he's easy on the eyes. We get it. He's like a buff dude. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, does he have the temperament, the message, the leadership, and the platform? Absolutely. Please make sure to vote for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, where in Michigan, it's an open primary. So if you're registered as a Republican, Independent, or Democrat, or some other party, you're very much allowed to support Abdul El-Sayed in that election, which is August 4th. So make sure that you're registered to vote, you're ready to cast your ballot, and lastly, that we support Dr. Abdul El-Sayed to win the United States Senate Democratic primary to become the next senator from Michigan. And that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and if you like what you heard and want to learn more, then make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Or you can follow along for more news and content on Instagram and TikTok. I use the same handle for both, so follow along at NSFD_pod. We are living in a very exciting time right now where on Saturday, July 25th, we're going to see Troy Jackson most likely become the Democratic nominee to represent Maine in the United States Senate. And then on August 4th, see Dr. Abdul El-Sayed win the Democratic primary to become the party's nominee to represent Michigan in the United States Senate. Well, if you want this to happen and support both these guys, then I strongly recommend that you get involved. And remember, democracy is not suitable without you.